Okay, gentlemen, here we go. In the next several videos, we are going to go through Megillat Esther, the story of the book of Esther, and I'm going to try to take you through it in short videos because I really want you guys to watch all of them and stay on top of this and really go into Purim with something special. So we're going to keep these videos short, and I'm going to go section by section and try to pull out one of the key lessons of that section. So it isn't just a story, but it's something meaningful, something to give you to think about and possibly even apply to your life or your world view. It's important when we're going through the book of Esther to get at least a sense in history as to when the story of Esther took place, because that's going to play a role in the lesson of the story. Now, I'm not going to start throwing out meaningless dates at you. It's always complicated to start hearing dates and confusing. But what I think is important for us to recognize is the fact that an essential part of Jewish history is to know that there were two temples that were a major part, a major focus of Jewish life that stood in Jerusalem. Most of you who are here listening to this video stood at the Kotel, at the Western Wall, and you were there at that place where the two temples stood. Now, the two temples each stood for a little bit over 400 years, one of them for 410, the other for 420. And there was a 70-year exile between the two of them. So after the first temple was destroyed, the Jewish people were kicked out of Israel. For 70 years, they lived in Babylon, moving over to Persia, that whole region where the Jews were spread out. And then many of them, not all of them, but many of them returned to Israel. The second temple stood for a little bit more than 400 years, and then it was destroyed by the Romans. Now, if you want to really get a sense when in history this is, the way I like to remember it is by the easiest date, and that is that the destruction of the second temple happened 70 CE. I kind of find that an easy date to remember. CE is kind of like the beginning of the years, the way we count them now is 2022. So this is 70 CE. That was the destruction of the second temple. So therefore, if you would go back about 400 years or so, that was the entire, so it was 400 years BCE, right? Around that time is when the second temple stood. Rewind 70 years, then 400 years before that, so we're kind of within 1,000 years BCE, that's when the two temples stood. And that was in many ways the climax of when the Jewish people were kind of viewed by the whole world as being powerful. A spiritual superpower, but even the military. So I mean, Israel those were the glory days. The Purim story happens in between the first and the second temple. Again, the Purim story happens in between the first and the second temple. And that is something that is very, very significant because a lot of the events that happened around the Purim story, which was at the end of the 70 years, focused on the fact that the Jewish people did not know what was going to be in their future. The prophets had told the Jewish people that after 70 years they would return to Israel and rebuild the temple. And many of them had given up hope. Think to yourself, right? I'm sure that you've come across some Jewish literature, if you've ever prayed the Amidah, if you've ever said the Birchat HaMazon, the grace after meals, or if you've ever said next year in Jerusalem, you know that a central part of Jewish belief is we always believe that we're going back to Israel. And for you, that's a lot more meaningful than for 2,000 years when people couldn't travel to Israel. Right now, here you see that we have the ability to get on a plane. We can go to Israel, assuming that you don't have COVID. You can go there and you can pray and you can be part of the culture, but you still know the country. It still feels like we're not there yet. There's still struggle. The temple is not rebuilt, right? We're still going to the Kotel and we see that there's a mosque behind it. And what the future will hold, who knows? We want peace. We want Jerusalem to be not a Jewish capital, but we want it to be the capital of the world. When King Solomon built the temple, King Solomon did not have in mind that this was going to be for the Jews and not for anyone else. His prayer was that this would be the spiritual world center for all religions to come. So that's the goal. The goal is for whatever God's plan is, however the Temple Mount is going to look, who knows? But one thing that we do know is that it's going to be a world center of spirituality, and we're certainly not there yet. And often, again, even though when we look at it that way, when we look how much closer we are now than we've ever been before, we're like, maybe there's hope. But imagine for 2,000 years, Jewish people didn't know, we're like, really? Is that a reality? Will we ever get Israel back? So for the Jewish people there in exile for those 70 years, they didn't know. They didn't know that there's going to be a second temple. They didn't know what's going to be. And at the end of the 70 years, the king of Persia, who was the king of that entire region, was the name of Achashverosh. Achashverosh. That's the way he's referred to in Megillah, in the Megillah, in the book of Esther. He makes this big party to celebrate the fact that he is the king of so many nations. He represents the world power. The Jewish people are never going to go back to Israel. The temple will never be rebuilt. And he makes this massive party, this massive orgy, and he tries to get the Jews to participate in it as a sign to say, hey guys, it's time to assimilate. Forget that Jewish heritage, right? We're going to party like it's whatever year it was, right? And we're going to forget, stop talking about Jerusalem, stop talking about the temple. You're one of us now. You're part of the Persian people. Come and party with us. And many Jews, they throw off their Judaism. They say, you know what, he's right? It's hopeless. Let's assimilate. And that triggers the entire Purim story. But something unusual happens at this banquet. And that is that in a drunken rage, Achashverosh decides that he wants to invite his wife Vashti into the party, and he wants her to pretty much put on a burlesque show. He wants her to appear naked in front of all of the men in order to show off her beauty. And Vashti refuses. And Achashverosh, something gets into him, and he decides that it's not exactly clear from the book, most people say he has her killed, or at least he has her exiled and banished from the kingdom. And there's a certain significance over here, because Achashverosh himself was not from royal blood. Vashti was. And because of that, he had a bit of an inferiority complex, and the fact that she refused to come was kind of her way of saying, you know what, listen, I really wear the pants in this family. I'm really the royalty and you're not. And this infuriates him, and he has her killed. And obviously the significance of that, as we're going to see in the next video, in the next chapter, is that it's going to open up a door for Queen Esther to become queen. And therefore, later on, when there's a decree in the kingdom against the Jews, a decree of genocide, Esther is going to be there in the palace, with the ability to save the Jewish people. And over here, the first message that we learn from Megillas Esther is the following. That in many ways, if we look at the Jews of Persia at the time, one could say they abandoned God. They wanted to assimilate. They didn't want their Jewish identity anymore. They had given up. And it sounds a lot like many of the Jews of our own era as well. Are we thinking about Jerusalem? Are we thinking about the future of the Jewish people? We've given up. But yet, even in that moment, God says, even now, even at this very party, where is sort of your declaration of assimilation, I'm already going to start opening up doors for your redemption to come later on. I have your back. Even though you're abandoning me right now, I still have your back, because I know deep down in your heart, I know that you really love me. I know that you really want to be part of the Jewish people. I know that you're scared. I know that you're confused. But I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to take care of you. And because of that, Achashverosh makes this very bizarre decision. And the commentaries teach us that sometimes the greater you are, God uses even the greatest people as puppets. Those people that are making major world decisions, they're also puppets of God. We believe that. We believe that as part of Jewish tradition, right? That, the higher you get, It just means that God is going to play much more of a role in all these world events. Even though we don't always see it at the time, we really genuinely believe that God is behind it. And Achashverosh, he's rich, he's got a big ego, right? But he flies off the handle and he makes dumb decisions. And God says, hey, you think you're powerful? Don't forget, I'm the one who's in control. I'm controlling you, and I'm going to make a fool out of you if I decide to do so. And God, in doing that, God says, I'm going to pave the way. I'm going to open up a door for the redemption of the Jewish people. And that's really what the whole book of Esther is all about. And we'll see a little bit more about that in the next video.